What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Deep Weeb podcast. This is KanjiEater. It has been a minute. Today's going to be a little bit different. If you haven't already noticed, it's just me. So we're going to do things a little bit more casually, maybe slow things down just a tad bit. That way your boy can get back used to being online and on a stream. That way we can potentially do this a little bit more. So today I wanted to kind of talk about where I've been, what I've been doing. 2022, last episode was with Aussie Man, so it's been a minute. 2023, I mean, this is it. You're looking at it. We're right here today. I got some more stuff planned, but this is we need to kind of get this going again, I figured. So let's just go ahead and jump into what I've got here. And first off, this was a question I received yesterday. What happened to your YouTube? It's still there. Believe it or not, I didn't disappear. I didn't delete my channel. I just haven't actually been making new content. And we can kind of talk about why that is and what I was trying out with that, what I learned from that. Because as usual, I'm always trying to learn how to do this stuff better. This also, I had originally planned for this to be like 30 minutes of us talking or something like that, and then or maybe doing like some gaming or something like that. And then it kind of just was like, oh, you know what? Let's just kind of get it all out there as far as like what 2022 and 2023 looked like in terms of Japanese, what was going on in my life, that sort of thing. And then I also really wanted to kind of show off just some like live streaming of how to make something useful. So I was gonna do some VN patching stuff as a little bit of an after party after this, depending on how long this actually goes, because I don't know. I made like 30 slides, so this is a very professional, very high quality KanjiEater presentation that you are about to receive. So still here, still alive. Yeah, Drifter says, I have no idea who you are or why I'm subscribed to you. I'm trying to find that out too, man. I don't know who you are either, Drifter, but welcome to the KanjiEater podcast here. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Japanese. You probably have some interest in that. Otherwise, you're about to. So let's dive on in. Please do, shoot some questions in chat. I'll try to be more interactive than usual because I'm not talking to a guest. I'm just talking to you guys. So let's keep the chat lively. I guess before we get too deep into this, this was a little something I stumbled upon today. My good friend Michael, he was informing me about the dangers of carpal tunnel. You know, when you got a platform, you kind of want to, use it to promote messages that, need to get out there. Maybe don't have the pedestal that they need, right? So Michael's been spreading the word about this, as you can see, since 2018. So I don't want to get carpal tunnel. Then he's calling out other people for getting carpal tunnel pilled. We got carpal tunnel speed running. But then as this is hot off the press. As of today, he's finally succumbed to the disease. So whoa, this is carpal tunnel place isn't so bad after all. So if we can get some wrists up in the chat for Michael, he's got the carpal tunnel, and this message needs to get out there. So let's get things a little bit more serious. How many kanji have you eaten? This is constantly the question, isn't it? So I figured I'd take us kind of through the path of where I started with eating the kanji. When my mother, gave me this title, it was specifically so that I would be bullied into learning as many kanji as possible, and it's been working. You guys stay on me about this pretty consistently. So 2020, we were looking at about 2,000, right? Maybe a little bit close to 2,100. It was that was back on that Anki grind. So this is obviously all just from trying to do as many Anki cards as possible. If the Anki card has a unique kanji in it, it got counted, right? And then so kind of the year after that, 2021, I think this was the year that I grinded out a lot of kanji. Not kanji, but Anki cards that were like leeches and stuff. So just stuff that I had seen before, but kind of had like shoved off to the side. So I probably overdid Anki. And so it shot up to 2,600. So that's a whole bunch. And then from there, it's like, this is 2022. And you can see that it's really started to slow down as far as how many kanji I'm actually mining and putting into Anki cards and that sort of thing at this point. So it probably is no surprise that, oh, and also I might hit 14,000 cards. I still haven't hit 14,000 cards. It's been like years of me doing like about 10 cards every day, but the rate at which like they get leached and then the rate at which they get leached basically just nullifies the new ones that I'm learning and are coming in. So if that makes sense, like a bunch are coming in, bunch are leaving because they're leeches, but eventually I add leeches back in. So if they're not active though, they wouldn't be counting towards this number. So these are like active cards out of the 14,000. So then present day, present time, got about 2,800. So that's how many kanji I'm eating. And obviously this doesn't count like kanji that I can write by hand. That always comes up. Like, can you write out kanji? Like I worked in Japan. I definitely learned how important it would be to actually be able to write out kanji by hand at the time that you need them, when you need them, right? Specifically like for whiteboarding, like computer science problems and that sort of stuff. Like people were doing that thing, right? I couldn't do that, and I still can't do that, and I still have no interest in doing that. Like I still don't even have any interest in like Kanken or something like that. Like just it doesn't seem like it's going to be that useful of a use of my time, considering how long it's taken me to get to where I am with Japanese in the first place. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So 2,800 unique kanji. You know what? And then another thing, actually, this came up last night. Another place where I was like, ooh, it would be useful to be able to write out kanji. Still not going to do it, but I'm on this Discord server with some people that are like novice mangaka, and somebody actually asked me to do like a what would be the word, like editorial for their novice work of like checking it over their name. So like if you don't know, in manga, like the name is like the draft before they actually start trying to draw the pictures pretty, basically like the layout, the flow, the story. So I was reviewing this thing for this guy of what his, you know, amateur one shot is basically, and there were like just all these notes in the margin and stuff that I was like, dang, if I ever tried to make manga or something like that, that would really be a struggle of trying to you know, write kanji in there by hand or something like that. I'd probably end up having to do it digitally, put in text box, IME it all the way, because that is the way for me. IME, can't say that. All right, so let's see. Let's check in with chat. So Saru Monkey says there will be ads in the future about if you or a loved one has suffered Osu carpal tunnel, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Yep. So Drifter says, I need to restart my Anki grind. I lost my deck when I switched phones, and it's cut off on my screen, but you got it in there. But never dug up my Anki web password. Yeah, actually, so I'm not going to cover it in this episode, but because I got to save something for some future episodes. But 2023 was the year when I lost my massive like 1,600 day streak in Anki, and there were reasons for that, legitimate reasons. But yeah, kind of disappointing. But I also lost some Anki grind stats this year. All right, so then here's another thing that remarkably well received on Twitter. You guys liked it that I pat myself on the back here. So I had this realization recently this year that kind of the reasons why I started off with learning Japanese have started to be met. I don't know how to say that more accurately. It's like at times I feel like I've already kind of hit the spot that I wanted, but the issue is I'm constantly like moving the goal line for what personal satisfaction with Japanese actually looks like. So that's kind of I don't know, an internal thing that I'm kind of still trying to balance of like, oh yeah, I've kind of reached what I've done, but now it's like that I'm not really satisfied in what that is. So I guess at times I have glimpses like this where it's like, hey, I actually hit what I was looking for out of this. So let's kind of go into what that was. And this was a question from the dictator over at Fragcord. I guess the main thing that I had originally set out for was to just not really have to worry about as far as like localizations, if they were actually happening or not. Like I've talked about this when I was on the Korikata podcast. I probably talked about this in my original podcast episode as well, where I was just kind of giving my background, like why I started on this. But really it was like I wanted to play games like Tales of Symphonia and its sequel that was supposed to come out. And then it was like, oh, I'm waiting for like a year and I don't even know if this thing is really going to come out or not. Constantly checking on these like translation patch sites. Hey, are they going to actually release something? Are they going to give up midway through? Am I ever going to actually get to play this game? And it was like, I really want to experience this content that may or may not come over. And basically the only games I was playing at that point were all the Japanese JRPG ones. So I was like, this kind of seems like it would be worthwhile to just learn Japanese at some point. And then I guess through all this journey that I've gotten to, it was really just this year that I was like, you know what, I feel like I'm probably good enough at a point where if I had, for what I had originally set out to do, if I were to look at my ability now, it'd be like, yeah, that's really what you wanted to do. You accomplished that. I'll definitely say that, I don't know, it's kind of weird to look back at yourself in like high school and be like, oh yeah, did I make my high school self proud? But I mean, that's kind of what's like flashing through my head. And obviously my goals have kind of evolved since then. But at the same time, it's like, hey, like this is what I wanted. This is what I got. It's actually really satisfying now. So I'm really happy with that. So a lot of times, especially when I'm talking about my own ability, I do try to be as humble as possible about it. So I don't really talk about the positive parts of my own Japanese. I don't think probably enough. Like when I was talking to my wife about this, she was actually like, yeah, but you're always saying you suck at Japanese. Like why would you be saying that, like you finally just all of a sudden this week, like you're satisfied with your Japanese ability? I was like, well, I mean, I do still suck at Japanese, but I've at least gotten to where I wanted with it. So, and I guess just to make that clear, like the reason being is like, there's just like a lot of stuff that I'm able to do just like naturally in Japanese, and Japanese being the default. So like I always wanted to just be able to read the magazines as they were coming out for manga, right? So like new serializations have come out and that sort of thing. Like, oh, I can just like pick open any random magazine for manga that has something new that might be interesting, and I'll just pick that up, start reading it, and it feels really natural. And I'll also I'll nitpick all of these in a minute, but like that's at least for that one, like feels like I got to where I wanted with the manga part of it. I haven't been playing enough games to really say that like I've really gotten to, like I haven't played a Tales game. Like that was the whole point of me learning Japanese in the first place, and I still just because I put it on such a pedestal and I waited for so long to actually like get into immersion. Again, like if you watch my original video on my podcast, it's like, hey, the first 4 years were like me just doing textbooks and that sort of thing. So like if you kind of, because of that, all this stuff got put on a pedestal that, oh, once I understand Japanese, like I'll actually go back and do this stuff. So hopefully in 2024 that will actually happen, where I'll play a Tales game. But I did start Persona 5. That's pretty cool. That was another one of those games where when I was in Japan and talking to one of my Japanese friends, I was like, you know, I just got to a point where I could understand like Persona 5. I think that's when I'll be like, I made it. You know what I mean? It's like, there we go. We did it. Like, so I started playing that like super briefly. I haven't spent a whole bunch of time in it, and it's more like I'm trying to finish off some of the other stuff like Muramasa that I restarted, and then put some more time in to focus on that one. But that's kind of where I'm at. So Persona 5, coming soon. KanjiEater is going to be consuming that one. So super happy about like where my Japanese is headed based on the immersion techniques, based on the stuff that I've been talking about on the podcast with all you guys. I do feel like it works, so that's cool. Compared to, like I said, like my past immersion techniques, they didn't really work very well. Or sorry, not immersion techniques, but Japanese learning techniques. And then at this point, another reason I'm satisfied with it is it's like at this point, if I want to get good, all I got to do is keep reading more of the good stuff. You know what I mean? It's like I want to get better. So at this point, just play Persona 5 and I'll get better. And then beyond that, it's just really like satisfying the stuff that I'm doing. I know that some people at this point when they get here are like, oh, I don't like anime anymore. Like that didn't happen. I don't watch a lot of anime at this point. But it's not like I dislike it. It's not like I started disliking Japanese culture, Japanese people, anything like that. It's quite the opposite. I have more of an appreciation than ever. So super happy with that. Super happy that I still love all the stuff that I kind of fell in love with as a kid. You know, I just started the Pokemon Sword and Shield too. So it's like even stuff that like, you know, you started out with in literally kindergarten. And now it's like, hey, like, you know, becoming an Oji-san and like still enjoying this stuff and playing it in Japanese. So I don't really see that changing. I don't really see me outgrowing like Japanese. It's not a fad, mom, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I'm at. So let's see, how's chat doing? So Emerardo says, sorry, I'm probably butchering your name, man. I agree. I think immersion learners in particular don't put a lot of value in traditional classroom learning, but it can be very beneficial for people. You know, it's one of those things like with classrooms. I feel like if you don't have any structure, if you can't set your own habits, it's probably the best way to get going, just because classes are going to force you to get like your butt in the seat in the classroom and start. But in general, you can always move faster than a classroom on your own if you just have like the smallest ounce of motivation. You know what I mean? And maybe motivation isn't even the right word, because it really just comes down to you got to have that habit. You got to start like putting in the hours, and then in no time you can pass up what anybody could do in a classroom. But yeah, I did all the classes that I possibly could over here in the States for where I was at without actually taking a Japanese major. So that's like 2.5 years. And at the end of that, I could barely get to like an N2-ish level. Barely. So it's like, I couldn't really recommend that. And then as I, you know, started actually using Japanese by just doing stuff that I like this sort of stuff, it instantly broke that barrier. So I would definitely, you know, I think there's probably like a time and a place for classes, but in general, I still wouldn't recommend them. They were a lot of money, and I could have been doing things that were more fun. Yeah. So, manga equals shiawase. So basically, yeah, at this point, another one of those things that I really wanted just when I was starting out was kind of that aesthetic of like, I just want to be able to read manga with my tea, listening to some heavy metal in the background. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't want it to be like some sort of arduous learning process or something like that. It just needs to kind of be that natural, comfy flow state. And it's definitely for manga, that's already the case. For VNs, after the amount of time that I spent with them, I'd say that's pretty much the case. Again, I'll kind of nitpick this in a minute, but in general, like it just feels supernatural, and that's really what I was looking for in this. So let's see, from Ceiling Gallery, how much time are you typically spending on reading, listening these days? So I'll definitely get into that. I've got some pretty graphs for you guys, because like I said, this is a very professional PowerPoint presentation. So we'll get into the exacts on that. And if I don't get to that question, feel free to bring it back up. So Saru Monkey says, how long do you take to understand something in Muramasa? Jazzy said he makes sure he understands first, but what is your take? So we talked to Jazzy a little bit about this on the podcast. I think we kind of overemphasized what he was saying as, I forget what the term was that he was using, like comprehensible reading or something like that. Attentive reading, something to that effect, where, you know, my impression was that, oh, he was making sure that he was understanding every little word. But Jazzy kind of clarified that on the podcast, that he was really just like trying to read through it once, just understand it and move on. So there was definitely stuff where he wasn't understanding all of it. And this is my interpretation of what he's saying. If Jazzy wants to come back from the Japanese grave and do this, because I ain't seen the boy in a bit. But if he wants to correct me on this, he definitely would be the right one too. But basically what I was getting from it was he's just trying to focus on the fact that he is reading as much as possible, read through, through it, get what he can from it, and move on. So, and I would say it would be the same with me and Muramasa. Specifically, how long? So, like, we can talk a little bit about VN stats here in a bit as far as like what reading speed looks like. I know Jazzy said by the end of DSRI, like he was getting like 10k characters per hour. I'm definitely not doing that in Muramasa. I can do that in like Umineko. Like by the end of, like, it's funny. I think I posted this before, maybe on Twitter, but there was like a power creep in Umineko from like chapter 1 to chapter 8, where it was like every chapter it went up by like 1,000 characters per hour, and by the end of it, it was like 12,000 characters per hour. So that's at least for me, that's probably the fastest. Well, it's the second fastest thing that I've ever read, probably. Part of that was because by the end of Umineko, I was so ready to be done. I was like let's just go through this, and I could tell what they were gonna say. So that's such a long VN. Anyways, I digress. So as far as like actually understanding something, Muramasa, I'm like 6,500 characters per hour, which is dead slow, like by basically anybody's standards for like just normal reading speed. With that being said, that one's pretty dense. You know what I mean? That one's got a abnormally sized vocab, and as I've talked about before, like I mine everything. Like if I don't know a word, even if it's like Tokugawa's name or some like, you know, ancient emperor or something like that, I'm mining it, and that's just because I think that stuff's cool. I'd rather spend some time like digging into it, learning it, soaking it up, rather than like not understanding some of the like nuances and that sort of thing. Like it'd be really easy, especially in Muramasa, to be like, oh, this is just like an info dump. I'm just gonna white noise this part because I can get through it. Oh, it's somebody's name. I don't really care who. Like that would be fine, but I'm definitely spending a little bit more time. And it's still like, for me, 6,500 characters average. It's not bad. Like it feels fine. Fisco Gamer asked, new podcast episode when? Dude, you're looking at it. I upgraded this to a full podcast episode. We'll probably publish this out to the normal podcast places. Yeah, it's a little different because I'm actually interacting with chat. Probably gonna have to go a little bit slower, take some deep breaths every now and then. But yeah, this is it. We're gonna do a nice little chill episode with just me and you guys. So this is very interesting, KanjiEater. Thanks for doing it. No, thank you. Appreciate that. So where were we on this? I think we just got through this, kind of talking about where I'm pretty satisfied with a lot of these things. And then I also immediately followed that up with, yeah, but it's not really what I was expecting when I started. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, I don't know. I guess part of this is when you decide you want to learn something like Japanese, you probably don't already have the network of people telling you what it's going to be like, right? And I certainly didn't have that. So for me, when I started, I was like, oh, I'll do a year of classes, you know, and I'll just get there. And it was like, it's laughable at this point. That's like just so far off that you could do a year of classes and then actually get to like the point where I'm at now, basically. And beyond that, what that would actually feel like before you have any sense of what learning a language would be like, you just sort of like, well, I assume I just like understand stuff kind of like I do in English right now. And it's just like, it's just so far different than that. And I guess just to anybody new who might be stumbling upon this at the first time, I would say the difference between where you're at and being native is absolutely huge. I know that's almost like a meme in the language learning community because it's just so obvious once you actually start down this path. But what does that actually mean? It really means that you're just not going to understand like a lot of stuff just for a very, very, very long time. And that is really dependent upon how many hours that you spend in the language, obviously. So even still, there's like, what was something recent that I did here that kind of summarizes this? So I watched, shoot, I can't believe it. I'm blanking on what the name of it starts with a B, and Beetlejuice. I watched the Japanese dub of Beetlejuice in Japanese like last week because I was on a flight. And I was like, and my wife wanted to watch it. So I was like, all right, I've never seen this. Let's see. So, even though I feel like a normal Japanese, normal conversation, interacting with people, working at an office, I've done all of that. It's like, and I can get through it. Watching Beetlejuice, there were still just times in it where I was like, I don't know what this plot is anymore because I can't tell what this guy is saying. my wife was like, well, I've seen it in English, and you can't really understand what this crazy guy is saying in English either. I think, because I haven't watched it in a long time either, she said. So it's like, okay, so maybe there's some weird stuff there, but because I don't have the native like confidence in the language, like I couldn't assert that. It was basically like, oh, there's something wrong with me here. And maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know, but I don't even have the confidence to assert that. And whereas in something like English, you totally would. So, and then there's just like pieces of plot that it's like, oh, I thought I got that and I really didn't. And again, that happens in English. It's just going to happen way more in Japanese, and that's still the case. And I would say like other things that it feels like are really kind of missing is just like listening in general for me right now. And partially that's because, and like this is what I still don't see in the language learning community enough, is people being like raw honest about like how people like about people's abilities, because it's so easy to just like make a video of the best cut of you doing something, like, oh, here's me with my italki tutor and we're just speaking perfect Japanese through the whole thing. And really it's like, dude, this is just a clean edit. Like you just edited this to, you know, make something smooth, something content, something enjoyable, but it kind of misses out on some of that raw of like you just completely dropping the ball, not having any idea how to say the word Wednesday or something like that. And it just loses a lot of that. And so I feel like what I'm trying to say here in particular is like, at least for me with listening, there's still just like a huge gap between what native would be and beyond even native. Like at this point, I could probably consider myself fluent. That's such a weird and loaded word. But like if I drop into a Discord server that's Japanese and I just jump into the chat, I can have a normal conversation and for the most part get a lot of it. But there will be a lot of stuff still for me, even at this point. I'm like, just to make this clear, like 5 years of going hard. Like it's like 5 years now of going hard on Japanese, not in Japan. And I think that's actually a big difference. Don't want to derail the conversation any more than I have. But basically, I can get a lot from these normal conversations, but there's still just a huge gap of stuff where it'll be like, ooh, I don't know what you are even talking about at this point, and I'm completely lost. At which point I know how to recover in Japanese. Like you learn the skills of like, oh well, what did you mean by this thing? Like, you know, like that you can kind of pick that up pretty easily. But then a lot of times that just by doing that you start derailing the conversation too. So it's like there's still a lot for me to improve on the listening piece. And I think when we get to like some 2024 goals for myself, I had to really, I don't know, we can talk about that. It's going to be a bit of a struggle for me to actually try to pick that up, because I don't know that I'm ready for the hardcore Aussie man arc of like 8 hours a day with like listening stuff. And that's really what I would have to do at this point. And it just seems like such a tedious uphill battle when I don't live in Japan and I'm not working in Japanese, and all of my actual real-time Japanese interactions would be with people like on Discord. I'm not working in Japan. If I was, this would be a lot easier, quite honestly. That's still the way to go. Forget like immersion and staying in the States or something like that. Like if I really just wanted to get good at Japanese, like just move to Japan already, man. But anyways, there are things keeping me here, which that's not for this episode. But so kind of nitpicking this. So I don't care if Japanese content gets localized anymore, is what I was saying before. And that feels really good, because it's like, I don't have to keep track of, oh, this thing didn't actually even get a localization. Don't care. I'm going to do it in Japanese anyways. But the issue with that at this point that I found is I've become, I don't know, I got the AJAT religion still baked a little bit too, maybe a little too far gone still. I know some people like just absolutely hate Japanese dubs, but I could have one of those like true life stories addicted to Japanese dubs, because it's like I'm not going to do anything in English if I don't have to, because it just feels like I get more out of it by doing it in Japanese. So like back in the day, I would think like, oh, if I'm going to play the game like Uncharted or something like that, like I'd be playing that in English because that's an English game. And if I wanted to do something like Final Fantasy, like, oh, like I'm going to do that in Japanese because that's the most natural way to experience those things, the intended way, the right way that the original director intended it to be. But I don't know, at some point something broke in my head and it's like, no, I got to do the Japanese dub of Uncharted, of Horizon Zero Dawn, yada yada. So it's like I I don't know that it's a bad thing, but I do think it's kind of weird. And I think when I talk about this with other people that are learning Japanese, they're like, "Oh no, don't do the Japanese dub." But it's like, oh, it's all I can actually appreciate. It feels like at this point, and I think that's probably not good because there are things like I was just ranting about this on Twitter about like the new Baldur's Gate 3 that it's finally like is going to get a official Japanese localization. I'd be like, whoa, that'd be really cool to actually do. But the kind of like short side of that is there's no way they're going to do a full Japanese dub for it because it's like 3 times the script of like what The Witcher 3 was, which I forget what it was. I posted the stat that IGN Japan quoted. But anyways, it's a lot of characters and they're probably not going to do a full voice edition. So now it's like, okay, so now I'm going to probably play like an inferior version that's been translated in Japanese with an English dub over the top of it for the full voice acting. I was like, dude, maybe you should just play it in English. But it's like, oh, no, that feels grody. No, please, no. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with that still. I have some thoughts on how I can fix that. And we'll get into like these nitpicks, how I would probably like to fix those. But that's kind of what's running through my head right now. So maybe before I move on to the immersion bubble comment on here, I'll just check in with chat on how we're doing with that. So no more podcast interviews. False. That is false. I just reached out to somebody this week. They have not gotten back to me, so until I know, it won't be announced. But yeah, I will say it's a high-profile member of one of the very popular Discord servers that stands for something I don't like, which is Moe. I hate Moe. But anyways, I really love the Moe Way Discord, and this is somebody who's there. So if you are a high-profile member, it might be you. Maybe you need to check your DMs on Discord. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, some of these, sorry, I probably missed them when we were in the actual moment there. Out of curiosity, what is your average hours per day of immersion since you started in 2018? It's probably like 4 hours. It's probably like that's always kind of felt like the minimum. It might have been lower in Japan, like when I was actually working a little bit longer hours. I worked probably about 2 extra hours every day when I was in Japan, compared to my hours that I was working in the States. But it's probably 4 hours. This year has been less, and I'll kind of get into that. But it's still going to average out because last year was, and we'll get into this, but it was 6 hours. Do you think your output will be better with just more immersion or some lessons about linguistic expresses in Japanese could also help? So what's going to make my output, your output, everyone's output better is by outputting. This one irks me quite a bit that there's so much misinformation from the language gurus out there that the whole you just are silent and then one day you magically output. Like, yeah, you can definitely still you can get through with your Japanese without ever outputting, after you've immersed for 1 year, 3 year, whatever. But that's a really big missed opportunity that you could have been interacting with people in Japanese. And I'm saying this having done it both ways. I have done it where very early on I was doing like italki lessons just regularly. Like this was back in the textbook days, and I was doing like 1 to 2 lessons a day. 1 to 2 lessons a day. No, 1 to 2 lessons a week for about an hour. And those were completely in Japanese. I'd be speaking to the tutor in Japanese. And it got me to a point where it was really natural to converse with this person who knew me, right? So it wasn't like I was talking to some random stranger. It was this lady tutor that I'd been with for a couple years at that point. So I probably did 2 or 3 years with her. And I definitely got to a point where I could speak pretty naturally and could just jump in and didn't really feel awkward about it, even though I was still not very good. Then that was really the foundation for me actually working in Japan. So that was actually really valuable to me, even though I wasn't very good. Then basically after I came back from Japan because I worked in Japan for 6 months. That was how long my company gave me to go do this thing. So worked in Japan for 6 months, came back. I didn't output like at all, and I'm still probably basically in that. Like there are very few occasions in my day-to-day life where I'm actually outputting in Japanese. I've had a few, there's like a few days where I'll get to go back and meet with the coworkers that I worked with in Japan. And then it's like, whoa, I got a 1 day complete of me just being in Japan, either being here and having them come over and talking to them in Japanese all day, or the opposite, me like going over there and being actually in Japan, talking with them all day. In those cases, it's still like, I can definitely do it. I've done like live professional translations, not very good, but like I'm able to communicate between the two parties when there isn't someone else who can actually do the translation at the time. So it's like I can definitely do translation work live, kind of that dual translation thing, which is, I would say, a pretty difficult skill to actually get good at. I do know people that have gotten good at that would usually be doing what I've had to fill in for in meetings. But I guess as far as how long should you actually be waiting to output, where I'm going with this is I still don't output very much on a regular day-to-day basis because I'm in the States. If I wanted to get good at output, I would be outputting every day for multiple hours, ideally. I will probably try to step that up this year. It's not going to be a try. It's like, that's the goal for 2024. Spoiler alert. Like, that's where I'm going to have to head with this, because I think that'll kind of give me satisfaction with where the goal is headed from here, basically, right? Like, reading's fine. I can read manga. I can do that. I need to work on listening, and I need to work on output. So that's kind of what I've got to be doing. So let's see what else we got from chat. What do you do for work stateside? Software engineering. I got into coding as part of my college degree. I managed to work for a company at I don't know how much I can say. They were like 1/3 the size they are now. I happened to get in at a really good time. They are 3 times the size they are now. They're a $1 billion company now, and now I basically work for them, and I'm one of the software architects at this point that builds really cool stuff for them. And we happen to have a sister company in Japan, so that really worked out really well in my favor for my own personal development as well as my career development. So software engineering, still love it. I would definitely recommend it if you are young and thinking about, oh, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? I had no idea how to code. I thought it was really bad for a really long time. It's just like Japanese once you start putting in the hours. I will say, I don't know if I made this comparison before. It took me 4.5 years to get a degree for computer science. Okay. And the half there was because I transferred to a different school from like a community college over to an actual university. It's taken me how long with Japanese now? I mean, like 4 years of not knowing what I was doing, and then I guess I'm almost at 5 for immersing, and I still don't feel like really. There are still a lot of places where I'm unsatisfied with it. Whereas with like coding, it's like I can pretty much. There's still a lot of things with coding I could say the same that I'm uncomfortable with them. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to reverse engineer and make the text hook stuff that people do in the agent servers. There's like 2 people that know how to do that stuff really well. I've tried to do it. My assembly skill, my reverse engineering skills, they aren't there. So there's like definitely things like that with coding where it's like, oh, I'm still not there quite where I'd be super comfortable with it. But I would say when I compare in my head the skill of like coding versus the skill of using Japanese, it's like, oh man, like coding was so much easier than learning Japanese to me. Like, so I don't know if, again, I'm very pro coding. If you're interested in it, check it out. Do you have any plans to move back to Japan? Maybe let's table some of those ones. Because I'd love to talk about that, but I probably should make sure that I'm making some time through the rest of these slides. My experience after 3 years of only immersion and no output is that I can form complete sentences and speak, but it's hard to remember words actively. you definitely need to practice. Yep, absolutely. I work in med tech. If you're ever looking for a shift, I can refer you. Very much appreciate it. I always love it when people are willing to help out not only myself but people in the old Deep Weeb community. So very much appreciated. Don't you worry about all the output becoming too unnatural or worse, unintelligible without native feedback. I don't really worry about that at all, quite honestly. I've given speeches in Japanese to Japanese company people, and I was doing that years ago when I was really awful at it, and I'm much better than that at this point. I think again, it's one of those things. I would love to get better. I would love to improve it, but I don't think you should ever really worry about your Japanese. Like, I don't think you should let it hinder you from trying to speak, right? I think that's always going to be the appreciated thing. Obviously, there's going to be room that you can get better at that skill, but don't let it hold you back without, you know, native feedback or whatever. Honestly, a lot of these days, like when I'm like typing out stuff, like when I gave this guy you know, feedback on his name, his mangaka name that I was talking about before, like I checked everything that I said by the end of it in ChatGPT, just to see. I was like, hey, is there anything, you know, I talked to ChatGPT in Japanese for this, like, hey, anything in this that you could smooth out for me? And then based on that feedback, sometimes I'll be like, no, that's bad feedback, ChatGPT, or that's good. Oh, I actually should probably say it that way. Because at this point, I do have at least that much intuition that I can tell when the robots are right and when they're wrong. At least I feel like I can. There's probably still stuff that I'm missing there too, but all right. So let's get through this slide, and then I'll circle back to some other questions that we had in chat. So as long as I'm in the perfect immersion bubble. So what I was talking about here was reading and understanding do feel natural depending on the source. Muramasa still feels difficult because it's got a bunch of like domain specific stuff that I haven't really played around with too much, like historical stuff, that sort of stuff, or just I don't know, really big vocab stuff that I haven't seen before. I don't know how else to say it. So, but it still feels really smooth when I'm reading through it because the tools that we have right now make this so easy, easier than it's ever been for learning Japanese. So, for instance, we got the holy trinity of the Texthooker UI, the Yomitan, and the little clipboard inserter thing that basically make it so that you can just instantly be looking up the hook, the text hook as you're reading it, right? So even if you don't understand a word, it's really quick to just look something up, say, oh, I understand that now because I read the Japanese definition, or cheat and read the English one. I still do that, guys. It's just a lot faster sometimes. I feel guilty about it when I do, but it is still there and I do it. So anyways, when you're reading through it, it's just really fast to actually get what's going on, even when you don't understand maybe a word or something. And that's very different still than what we'll get to. Some of the things that I still have a little bit more of a struggle with. It's very different. Like, obviously, when you're talking to someone in Japanese, there's no subtitles for them. When you're, you know, working in the office with them. So it gives it, I've noticed that I have a false sense of how good I am based on how long I'm spending inside of this like little fake immersion bubble that I've got. And I don't know that fake's the right word there, but you know, you get what I'm saying, that like you have all these tools that make it really convenient so that you're still using Japanese for all of this, but it's kind of catered to you as a language learner and not really realistic to how you might actually be interacting with this if you had to do it in real time. And I think that's so I guess that's what I'm trying to call out there, that I feel really comfortable doing all this stuff in Japanese. I enjoy the methods that I'm using to read stuff in Japanese, but at times it does feel a bit unnatural. So it's just something that I'm kind of got an eye on. And then I kind of already touched on that. I think listening just in general needs to improve with me personally. Yeah, and then lost motivation to interact with the Ningans. So the other fellow humans, like, honestly, it turns out if you just for an entire year just play VNs and that's pretty much all you do, and you're simulating, you know, all your friendships and relationships and all that sort of stuff, and it's giving you what you want as far as getting better at your goal, it kind of takes away that motivation to just jump into Japanese Discord servers and actually be speaking with real people about it. Also, just VNs in general and manga and, you know, all this other media that we're consuming in the immersion community, I feel like it makes it really easy to gamify stuff. Like, oh, I read this many volumes of this light novel. I feel really accomplished doing that. Whereas I don't know that we have gamified human relations enough to make it satisfying. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I made 3 new friends today, and that felt really good. Or I had 2 hours of conversation in this Discord server, 1 in this one, that sort of thing. And I'm obviously talking about like doing it in Discord servers because that's what kind of resonates with me. But it could be Hello Talk or whatever, you know. So that's I don't know. I'll get into my ideas for that as well, of how we can gamify that and make that a little bit more interesting in the Japanese learning community. Let's check in with chat real quick. What's the trades looking like in Japan? Are they as starved for plumbers and electricians as the rest of the world's electrician? So why don't we try to save that one till I talk about some of my house stuff, because that's a fun one for 2023 actually. All right, so now let's follow back on some of those points that I just made here. So so if it feels like I can't enjoy stuff in English, probably the solution to that is just start doing some stuff in English. That's good. Obviously I don't need to, and I'm sorry, I know this is sacrilege for some of us. Sorry, Chase the Based. I know you always pat me on the back when I bash on English, because we both share that mutual hate for our native language. But I'm thinking I probably need to pick up some English stuff again. Specifically, I'm thinking there's a lot of audiobooks that have like self-improvement stuff, just stuff that doesn't exist in Japanese. No Japanese dub, no chance of it getting, well, I won't say no chance of it, but very low chance of it ever actually being localized. That seems like it'd probably be worth it at this point, as deep as I am into Japanese, to actually do a little bit of English stuff that could be maybe like personal self-improvement, maybe like career development stuff, or even like parenting stuff, because spoiler alert on this, 2024 might involve some of that. We'll see. We don't know yet, but we'll see. And so I think it's probably time to at least put a little bit of that back into the normal flow. But at the same time, I got to get my my Japanese hours in, so I don't know. We'll see how that works. As long as I'm in the perfect immersion bubble. So what I'll also say on that point is the amount of content that I can just consume without any of the fancy language learning tools is obviously always increasing. So I see that a lot with, you know, like when you're doing VNs at the beginning, I would highly recommend just read VNs that hook, because it's going to make it way easier to look stuff up. But sometimes you want to play a PlayStation 1 game, a PlayStation 1 VN or something like that, and that stuff's not going to hook. Like PlayStation 1 games, I think I know of like one where a text hook's been made for it and it works. So you just got to get to a point where you can kind of enjoy and consume that. And at this point, I've done a lot of that. Like there are a whole bunch of stuff that I've played through or read through paperback novels that still feels good. But it's obviously a smaller subset of content that I feel like I can enjoy outside the bubble. So for instance, like when I read something on Tachiyomi, like the Android app for reading manga, I have a select set of series that I've picked out that it's like, I'm not going to have to look up any words in these series, because I'm just going to get enough of it that it's just going to be natural. And so basically, if I think something's really difficult, I'll just keep it in that immersion bubble that I'm talking about, that immersion pool bubble. Whereas if it's something that I feel like I can just pick up pretty quickly, I'll challenge myself by putting it on those other devices that are going to be limited in the tool set that I have. But you really, especially at the beginning, you just kind of want to avoid doing anything like that that's going to slow you down from being able to comprehend things as fast as possible. Okay. So I actually did have, I'll say I felt like, I've said this before. I think there have been very few times, given how long that I've actually worked on learning Japanese in order to use Japanese, that I felt like I've had gains, like measurable feel of gains. You know what I mean? Like where it's like, oh yeah, this month I was much better. That's super rare, especially for me at this point. Maybe it was there at the beginning and I just wasn't paying attention to it, but honestly, I don't think so. Just because of how long in particular my journey has been, it's just always felt super slow. But at a certain point, that super slow just became kind of like, oh, this is just what it feels like. It's like watching a plant grow. Like that's just the reality of it. And so I can look back over a couple months and be like, oh, this is still satisfying to like see these gains. So where I'm going with this is I actually did this year see at least one place where it was like, whoa, it felt like I actually got much better at listening. And that was by spending like 70 hours listening to a very specific podcast, Game Nantoka. Super good podcast. Highly recommend it. Just talking about games. It was easy to follow along with because I guess I've kept up more with gaming news than anything else, like anime news or any of the other podcasts that might be out there. It was just super natural to listen to this one. So again, it's not like I feel like I get every single sentence that people are saying though. And I would say that's very different still than if I'm like watching a show with Japanese subtitles, where it's like I will get every single word that they're saying because I spent so much time reading. And that's still a big difference with audio, where it's like, I'm not going to get everything. But if we have Japanese subtitles, won't be a problem. So anyways, that definitely, obviously the key to any of this stuff is the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I just haven't really prioritized doing podcasts and audiobooks. I've tried to dabble in audiobooks a bit, but it's not like I'm doing 8 hours or 4 hours even of like audiobooks in a day. And if I really wanted to get good at that, that's really what it would take. I just don't have the motivation to actually do that because it just sounds really boring to me, quite honestly. I could force, and that's what I've seen is I can force myself to do. I mean, I can force myself to grind through Anki for 4 hours a day. I could definitely force myself to enjoy 4 hours of audiobook in comparison. But it just, when there's so much other stuff to like read, like it feels really bad when you have a massive backlog of anything, games, manga, whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm not going to get to any of these this year because I'm just focusing on this thing. So yeah, super weak. So, all right. I want to gatekeep this a bit. So I haven't heard anybody else talk about this in the Japanese language learning community. Anybody else? Like I've looked for it a little bit. I've seen maybe one or two comments of people briefly talking about it. Nobody's talked about how to get into it. Nobody's talked about how awesome it can be. TRPGs, so tabletop RPGs, as they know them in Japanese, the whole Dungeons and Dragons thing. But they don't do Dungeons and Dragons in Japan. They do Sword World and they do Call of Cthulhu. So I started on this year. My goal for this year, I forgot. Later on, I think I have a slide that says I didn't have any goals for last year. But one of my goals was I really just want to try a TRPG session. Basically, pick a character, create your character, act like your character, and you have a game master that's, trying to portray this world to you as you go through some sort of narrative, some sort of story in real time with other real human beings, right? So it's a great way to actually interact with other people. I will say, like, if you don't have at least some confidence in your Japanese speaking ability, like if you have just none, your listening ability, don't even think about doing this at this point. Like, it's just going to be a complete waste of time because it's really difficult. It's really difficult to do TRPGs. The reason being, it's like, like the first thing that anybody ever talks about when they're like, oh, I've been learning Japanese for so many years, but the thing that's still hard is if I go to dinner with a bunch of Japanese people and they're all talking over each other, I tend to still get lost in the conversation. Like, that's another, like, almost meme level thing of, like, everybody's got that. Everybody experiences that as a non-native to that language. So it's like TRPGs is literally just thrusting you into that. Where it's like, you have this fictional world, probably all these weird characters, weird names, Cthulhu mythos, like, and you're juggling all of that while trying to also act like a character yourself. There's a lot going on, and it's really complicated. In fact, I did throw in here. This is actually a screenshot from the one that I did, which was like an 8-day, 8-hour session one. So this is a lot of time spent outputting. So I guess I kept saying I didn't do any outputting. I output quite a bit for this year compared to previous years, but it's still not that much. It's still like, I don't know, 60 hours or something like that. So, I don't know. You can just look at this and be as overwhelmed as I was when I had to start figuring this out for the first time, as we've got like literally 7 other Japanese people like who know what they're doing, by the way. Like, that's the other thing is like I still have not read through the Call of Cthulhu rulebook. It's on my to-do list and I'm prioritizing it very high. But like, I didn't even know what the rules were. So people are just like, oh yeah, roll this dice, KanjiEater, like do this thing at this point. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. Like, did I get it? Was that the right dice roll? And they're like, no, you lost 2 health. Like, I don't know why, but okay, like that's fine. Anyways, so I captured what was going on in this. I'll just read this to you. So what's going on in this TRPG screenshot that I took is my goth girl, Yugi, and someone who treats Irohasu water like a religion are being assaulted by a Lovecraftian horrors in a city from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as we do battle royale while solving mysteries. Also, at least half of us can secretly transform into common writer characters. Like, so yeah, just like normal Japanese immersion stuff, right? So it's pretty complicated, but it was fun to just like dive in and try something. This one, so I did 2 TRPG sessions this last year. One of them was just like one-on-one, me with a GM, and just kind of like talking through this scenario. That was really good because there wasn't a lot of pressure. The guy was like, oh, you're a foreigner. Like, I can tell right away. Like, okay, yeah, my accent must still be pretty awful. But we kind of dove into some of the different, by the end of the session, it was like us diving into different ideologies between like how Japan thinks and how America thinks. And it was a really, I guess, rewarding experience to be able to share that with that one guy. And him kind of just being like, oh, you want to get into this? Like, here are the different TRPGs that are out there. You should really try Sword World because you want to do some brain dead stuff like, oh, I want to go swing my sword and be cool, like that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, that's really what I want. Like, the Call of Cthulhu stuff is going to be way more complex for you. Like, maybe you should like you can still do that one because you just did that one today, but it's like in general you might enjoy some of these other ones better. And it's like, all right, cool, I'll check those out. So that's kind of for 2024 something that I'm looking into doing, like spreading out, getting a couple different ones that I can participate in, and just kind of exploring it. But anyways, that was a really good one because anytime I would say something like, hey, I want to go do this dumb thing, swing a sword in this game world, he'd be like, yeah, but do you really want to do that? Because like it will have this and this consequence. And I was like, oh no, I probably don't. So it was very nice because it was like easy correction in Japanese as we were doing all this stuff in Japanese, right? This one though, this was like, it was PvP first off. So like already it's like I'm set up for failure. Like, who wants to make an alliance with the gaijin who's like doesn't know the rules, doesn't, you can barely like really convey what you're trying to say inside of us solving these mysteries. It was just really complex, and it just honestly at a certain point I was like, it doesn't even make sense for me to like keep going to these. I went to all of them that I was invited to. We still had a good time, I think, for what we were doing. But also, it wasn't just me. It was like, this one was weird because by the end of it, other people weren't coming too. So it was like, it just felt like people were kind of falling off from it. Not to mention, everybody was supposed to be fighting instead of kind of what I wanted from like a TRPG experience was like collaborating with other people. So that's kind of what I would look for, like getting into TRPGs, is don't do PvP for one of your first big ones because it's just not going to be fun if you have to like fight other people and like you're going to lose basically. And that's kind of what I felt like. So it was super cool though, and I was really grateful to the GM who pulled me in. I actually had a conversation with him before. I was like, hey dude, like here, let me turn on my camera. White guy here. don't know what I'm doing in Japanese. Can we still do this in Japanese together? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was really like, I don't think I can probably do this. I think this is going to be too much of a time commitment given some other things that I got going on. He's like, no, dude, just do it. Just come on. You can do it. And then so he talked me into it. And then once we actually got into the battles, he abandoned me and I died immediately. So, but I didn't really die immediately. He helped me out a lot, but it was definitely one of those experiences where PvP is not the place to start, guys. But anyways, TRPGs. Let's not let that get out to the rest of the Japanese communities because I don't want all my TRPG sessions that I'm going to be diving into this year having a bunch of gaijin. You guys are okay because we're in the niche Deep Weeb family, but we got to keep this one gatekeeping. All right. Gate kept. What's the past tense of gate kept? All right. So, let's see. So, Kame says, I did a lot of Japanese audiobooks and I got pretty good at listening to them just by listening to them while driving. That's awesome. I don't have a commute anymore, so I basically don't listen to a bunch of audio stuff anymore. That's just one of those things. Like, I also don't, in general, listen to as much music as I used to because I got rid of the commute. So that commute, I'm probably spending that time reading. And you're right. If I just spent the time consistently doing audiobooks, I probably get pretty good at them. That being said, I've done a few audiobooks. I think I've tracked them on Book Meter. You guys can see which ones I've listened to. I really do enjoy some of the simpler ones. Machi no Tom and Soya. Like that's a good one. It's like grade school level. Grade school makes it sound low. It'd be like a Harry Potter level or something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like meant for kids, but you can enjoy it as an adult, and it's lighthearted Japanese adventure stuff. So yeah, it's definitely like I can do it. It's just there's a big difference between that and reading ability. Rule number 1, yeah, don't talk about the TRPG clubs. I think we're gonna have to start saying that. Like, rule number 1, we gotta gatekeep this one. Keep it under wraps. I might make a secret Discord channel on this, so that we can, still talk about this, but keep it under the wraps. Also, good news. This is in real time. Our next podcast guest has just confirmed. So that's cool. Oh, should I say it now or should I do a big announcement later? I don't know. Maybe at the end of the episode. We'll see. We'll see how we're feeling. Anyways, we are already at an hour and I still got more content. I'll just keep going with this. But we might have to cut some of the after party short a bit. So anyways, 2022, what was the point of it? What did I do? What did I accomplish? Main thing was VNs. Like I basically just did VNs. And that was really from me coming off of that high talking to Jazzy and him being like, oh yeah, I got pretty good, pretty short amount of time by doing 8 hours of VNs. I was like, you know what? That sounds like fun. Like, I haven't really done much with VNs. I really like the Gyakuten Saiban series. Like, hey, let's go try that out. That sort of stuff. So I read through like 28 VNs, which that's a lot. And I think some of the key things that I got from this were, first off, a club really helped. It's one of those things that I was lacking in 2023, and why I didn't read probably as much as I could have, because I didn't have people being like, all right, here's what we're reading this month, and me being willing to say, all right, whatever the club picks, I'll just go do. I obviously didn't read everything that anybody just told me to. Like, I was like, this one doesn't seem interesting, so I'm just going to skip this week and do this month and do some other ones. But in general, I was super flexible in what I wanted to read. And that allowed me to partake in a community that I probably wouldn't have otherwise if I would have just been like, oh, I'm going to lock down and just do my own thing in my own bucket. So that community really helped. So I really appreciate the VN community. You guys know who you are. Really appreciated it. It was fun. But I did move away from that in 2023. We'll talk about that in a minute. But these were the best ones that I played. Unfortunately, the ones for 2023 are going to be quite a bit. Like, I just don't have as many to pick from. I'll do another collage like this, but there's just not as many to pick from. And I feel like probably is around half the VNs I read this year I thought I would like, and I didn't. So we'll talk about that. Highlights, though, if you haven't read the Tsukihime remake, just like start on that now. I know people get hung up on, oh, but part 2 isn't out. It's like, yeah, but the routes that are available in this one are top notch and they're standalone. So, like, don't delay. The other one that I would really recommend is this Ihanashi no Majo, which is, it's built in the same engine that I want to do this hook patch for this other game as part of like a later stream, but this was one that I actually patched myself, shared it with you guys, and a lot of people really like this one as well. So that was actually surprisingly one of my top picks. Just like a wholesome adventure, I would say. And it's doujin, so it's kind of cool to see somebody do it's the exact opposite of this super high production type moon creation. But anyways, I definitely with reading VNs, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of these that are just like purely mediocre. And that's really what I walked away with from that year with. I read a lot of stuff that just was not very good that I would not recommend other people read, quite honestly. Basically, anything that I rated on VND, like a 7 or above, is probably good. Anything 8 or above, I'd recommend, like, just read it. It's good. Anything below that, which is like probably like 20 VNs, it's probably not worth your time unless you're just trying to get good at Japanese like I was. So, that's my opinion on that. So the I already kind of mentioned, I don't a lot of times see like super big Japanese gains. This year, 2022, so last year, 2022, I felt some really big gains, like as far as reading. There were just times in the VNs that I was reading at the beginning of the year where I was like, man, I just got to keep rereading this line over and over, or like trying to get it, just not able to cleanly parse through it like I wanted. And then by the end of that year, it was like, nope, I don't really have that problem as much. Like it'll happen time to time, but this just feels like normal reading, kind of like how I feel while I read manga. So it's like, I definitely started to get used to the medium, and that was really satisfying. That again kind of contributes to that tweet that I had before. So 2022, people were asking about stats. How much do you average? I don't have all my stats in here to talk about tonight, but 2022 and 2023 are in here because they're the most recent, they're the most relevant. I will say, in general, it was probably about 4 hours of immersion as a bare minimum. 2022, I was killing it. Like, look at this. Like, on average, this is for listening and reading, is as the darker green here. I was hitting like 6 hours average per day. Then the, lighter color here, we're talking about like, that's about an hour of Anki that I was doing pretty consistently. So super consistent with Anki, super consistent with immersion. You can see there's a slight dip here because that's when I got into CRTs, which we're not going to talk about those tonight. But if you want to get me off on a tangent, I do love my CRT monitors that I've been playing around with. I got 2 for free, and I absolutely love them. So 2022, take that in for a minute. I'm going to drink some water. All right. So then what happened in 2023? Like, look at that. Oh my gosh. Like, we went from power chad to absolute chud in time. Like, so the majority of this time for the dark green is still reading. Like, a lot of this isn't listening. It'd be nice if I broke that up on the graph, like what the difference there was between reading and listening, but I haven't gotten around to that. For this though, we're talking about it's still probably mostly reading in this for the time that I had, but a couple of these, like this November one, is basically primarily listening. It wasn't intentional, it was just that's what I had time to do. So we will have to talk a little bit about why that happened, but needless to say, I would love to have a lot more years like 2022 when it comes to learning Japanese and when it comes to using Japanese, because at this point it's not just like learning Japanese. I feel like I'm using it for the stuff that I would want, right? So I would love to be using Japanese for a lot more things than I did this year. So kind of what happened there, like why do I feel like 2022 was so much more successful than 2023? Actually, when I originally made this slide early this morning, I was like, dude, this slide is so depressing because it's just like, no clear goals for 2023, no clubs, no community, no podcast episodes till now, and then we'll get to what the and is in a minute. But it's like, dude, this is kind of depressing. So I was like, let me at least put in a couple things that I did this year that were cool, because it's like, it wasn't a bad year by any means. It was just I was busy with other stuff in real life, you know what I mean? And that's gonna happen. So like, I shouldn't be beating myself up about it. But I was looking at this slide and I was like, oh man. So anyways, no clear goals for 2023. I forgot, like, there was a clear goal, and that was get in a TRPG session, and I did that. Check that box. It was super difficult. I want to do more of it. I kind of dropped the ball as far as continuing to do it, and that will change in 2024, but that it was like, okay, well, I did that one thing, and that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to be done with Muramasa by like the halfway point of the year, but things came up, so that didn't happen. And so now I'm not even going to be able to finish it this year. So that was the other clear goal. It's like, I want to just get through Muramasa. I got a couple other VNs, the other ones down here that I want to read first, but then like build up to one of the more difficult ones and just get through that and enjoy it. I am at the point where I'm reading through it. I'm enjoying it. I got to say, guys, I don't want to say like give a rating when I'm only like halfway done through it, because VNs are notorious for like halfway through it. It's like, oh man, now it just gets repetitive and stupid and I hate it. But this is some top tier Berserk level stuff. Like there's some dark stuff. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's some very dark stuff in there that yeah. It's a good one though. I'm really enjoying this one, whereas a lot of the ones that I read earlier this year is just a bit of a letdown, I feel like. So any recommendations for VNs starring adults? Man, there's unfortunately this like little emoji over the OBS chat box that blocks off whoever the last person was talking in chat. It's killing me. Any more recommendations for VNs starring adults? Kind of tired of the primary school stories. Dude, you sound exactly like my wife. My wife is refusing to read or do any like medium that involves Japanese high school. Unfortunately, that eliminates 99% of all medium. And, you know, it's also not too far off from a lot of this style of content in America as well. Like the fact is we like kids like in their teens, like doing adventures and stuff. So it's really hard to give recommendations when you're like, hey, let's delete the majority of all of them. So recommendations starring adults, basically, like, I don't know, the focus of the VNs that I read that I would recommend aren't the ones that center around school, but they might still be school students. I'm gonna always recommend, like I had a really hard time finding the VNs that I actually like, and I found the ones that I like are Type Moon. Like, it's just anything by Type Moon is good, is what I found from the sample size of 3 that I have. Fate, Tsukihime, and what was the other one that I read? I forgot. Mahotsukai no Yoru. All those are great. So, not adults, so I didn't really answer your question. Muramasa is pretty dope, but again, I don't want to spoil anything, but a kid gets peed on in the first chapter. So, like, you know, there's some dark stuff in that one that you might want to steer away from. I promise there are no more Muramasa spoilers, but that's one that primarily does star adults doing adult stuff. Any other ones that I've read that don't star high school students? Yeah, no, because that's basically what VNs are. Sorry, man. It's one of those things where I feel like the VN medium as a whole is really underutilized for what it could be. Like, they still tend to be primarily, I always hear this, that it's like, VNs aren't just dating sims. And it's like, they're not. But that's still primarily what most of them are, because they all have these routes. A lot of them are very repetitive, and it can be really obnoxious to actually get through VNs, quite honestly. So that's why I'm like, Type Moon ones, I can at least give you a safe bet that those ones are good. Once you get pickier beyond that, like, the VN medium as a whole just isn't big enough that you can be that picky, is what I found. So you really just got to try a few, get into a couple. The Nitro Plus ones are also really, like, just as a whole, like, Muramasa's Nitro Plus, but any of them by Nitro Plus are tend to be a little bit darker, so they probably won't focus around high school stuff. But like Hanachirasu is also, like, that one's not high school people, but it's got some dark stuff in it. It's pretty good, by the same guy that did Muramasa. Yeah, Ayoku no Yustia. That one's on my list to read because it's dark fantasy. I do think that one looks cool. I definitely haven't, like, I don't think I've even scheduled when. If you look at my VNDB right now, it is like scheduled out for like the next 4 years, like till, I don't know, like 2027, of like, here's what I can probably realistically read at that point. and by the end of it, it's like I probably won't realistically read some of these. But it's like, now that I know how fast I can read a VN, and I can just track the characters and basically predict, like, to the week when I'm going to get done with something, it makes it really easy to say, okay, well, I'll be able to get through all of these ones by this time. So it's really hard at this point to say, like, oh, I'm going to read some new ones that aren't on that list, because at this point I've started that list for what I'm going to read for like the next 4 years for so many hours. It's like, this is what's coming down the pipeline. This is what I have the time. The only way I could do more of this is if I cut out other stuff like output immersion or output and TRPGs and the other stuff that I want to get into, which I just don't really think realistically aligns with my goals in 2024. So that's kind of where we're at. Debu Plus, yeah, sure. That one sounds fun, doesn't it? No, probably not. I do tend to steer away from like the adult content, and part of this is just my Midwestern American upbringing, that I have no problem watching people get, you know, head sliced off and stuff. But as soon as somebody shows a nipple, like, you know, us Midwestern Americans get really uncomfortable. So it's like I'm really going to probably avoid anything that has more adult content than necessary. And I have no problem hitting the skip button once people do start showing their PPs and stuff. So yeah, that's fair. I don't hate it or have anything against it. It's just not feeling at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. Tokyo Necro, yeah, absolutely. That one's scheduled for me probably sometime in the next 2 years. We'll see. I don't know. It's definitely high priority. Debu Plus should be a priority nonetheless. Fair enough, man. All right. So the and here. So what else happened? So I bought a new house. And needless to say, that's why my stats tanked. It's a pretty sweet house though, right? From the look of it. So basically I was in the Chicago area, and I was really getting tired of just frankly my neighbor trying to poison me with his 4 cars that were constantly blowing exhaust into my house. And I was like, you know what? If I'm just sitting here chilling, reading VNs, I kind of want a bit better aesthetic than, you know, huffing on his fumes all day. So like, let's start looking into what some other options are. So maybe set us up for some future stuff. Not to mention, like, my family's not in Chicago, so maybe we can move someplace else that'd be a little bit more convenient. Started looking around, and I was like, ooh, like, there's nothing that's really like a decent price right now in like the housing market in the States. So I was just like it's not really looking good. That's when I found this haunted mansion that had been foreclosed. So it was like, hey, like, this place has been abandoned. It's a complete mess, but it's on a lake. So I was like, all right, like, I'm young. I got an able body. Let's get it to work. Let's learn how to do some new skills, jump in, like, figure this stuff out, right? I will say this week, so we bought this place 6 months ago. We somehow managed to get it. Managed to get it at, honestly, like, a really good price. Reason being, it's still a lot of work that we have cut out for us after working on it like nonstop for 6 months. But I did review this with my wife this week. I was like, so if we did this all again, and maybe she asked me, it's like, would you do all of this again? Like, if you knew how much work fixing up this foreclosed place that has all these hidden little things that we didn't know about, would you still do it? I was like, no, absolutely not. It's way too much time. I just want to go back to doing my fun Japanese stuff. I just want to read my manga. I don't want to have to worry for the like 12th time if the roof is leaking, which has been like the death of me at this point in this place. I probably should just do another one of these casual chats, kind of going through some before and after pictures of how messed up this place was on the inside. Because you see this on the outside and you're like, oh, it looks like a little Ghibli forest. Like, oh, this is cool. Like, it's on a lake. And it's like, and then you go inside and it's just like covered in mold. And there's just been squirrels that have been living in it for who knows how long. And I'm shop vacuuming out like 1 million walnuts from where they had just lived inside of the roof, inside of the ceiling, actually. For the lower level. I didn't have power for like the first 6 weeks of me being there in the lower level. So it's just like, hey, yeah, you know, it makes a really good social media post, but the dark reality behind this is you definitely shouldn't be jealous of my fancy little lake house because it's literally killing me at this point. That being said, it does look pretty. So that is the nice aesthetic that I did manage to get out of it. Arena VNs, got a nice lake view like over here. We got the new Deep Weebs studio behind me that you can't see because thanks to NVIDIA Broadcast. Thank you. But anyways, yeah, a lot of this stuff. So like for instance, I didn't expect to have to replace this entire deck that was here on the lake. It's pretty cool, right? Like a lake deck. Whoa, there's also this pool that hasn't been opened up for 5 years that I will probably never actually be able to fix. And then we've got over here, like me having to tear this thing up with my brother-in-law, making a gigantic pile of trash that I then have to figure out how somebody can get rid of this much trash legally. And then me having to figure out how to use a bunch of power tools without chopping off all my fingers. I do still have all my fingers, all my limbs. So at least in that regard, it was a success. And I gotta say, this actually turned out pretty good. This is looking pretty good, KanjiEater. You figured out how to do some woodworking. So appreciate Lewd Warrior with a question on this. So let's jump into his questions relating to my deck. So did you have any previous experience working with wood before? Wink, wink. No, I did not. The first time I cut a piece of wood was for this deck, and it was a lot of work to figure all of this out, watching all the safety videos. Expensive to buy a bunch of stuff. I was just going to pay more people to do it. But at this point, I paid people to do so much stuff in this house. I don't want to keep paying people. I'm getting bled here, boys. KanjiEater is not struggling by any means, but it's like, I mean, we're setting back retirement a couple of years, and that's not fun to think about. So anyways, what were some of the restorations you had to do for the new house to make it livable? A lot. From everything from replacing roofs, decks, ceilings. Basically an entire room just had water inside of vents that were inside of a concrete slab in the floor and would just fill up with water. And it was just like a bunch of stuff like that honestly I'll probably just have to do its own episode on, and it won't be Japanese related, besides how I managed to try to fit some Japanese time in between doing all this real life stuff. But the fact is, I kind of wanted to set myself up now to do something like this because I knew I couldn't do it later. You know what I mean? Like if I got a kid, if I got a lot of other responsibilities, like the worst thing that would happen to me right now is that I'd have to reduce some time in Japanese, and that's what I decided to do. So I cut back a little bit of time on Japanese. Please forgive me. So after rebuilding the deck, are you planning on doing more DIY house stuff? Dude, the DIY house stuff is an unending list at this point. My old house that I had up in the Chicago burbs was tiny. It was simple. This one, because it was foreclosed and was basically same. This house was cheaper than my house that was 1/3 the size of it in Chicago. So it was like, this place was a steal. But the trade-off for that is I basically have a DIY list that could last me the rest of my life. Like, just look at all these leaves on the ground. I'm not going to start raking these up, but it's like this place just has maintenance that I wouldn't have had to do if I was living in a really tiny place in the city. And I don't know, I do miss how low maintenance that is, but at the same time, having just like a little bit of privacy in your day-to-day life, it is nice. So yeah, the DIY stuff has no shortage. I didn't really have any DIY stuff I had to do at my old house because I did it in the first couple of years. Like there was stuff I had to do to fix up the place, you know, once you move into a new house, but it wasn't like I was doing anything. I wasn't doing any landscaping or lawn work or anything like that, pretty much. I was like cutting the grass once a week, you know what I mean? But it was super simple, and this place is just not simple. It's not simple maintenance. So there's a lot. I don't want to be like overly negative about it because it is awesome, but that's the reality that I knew all of this going in, you know what I mean? I knew that it was going to be more maintenance and all that, but I was like, you know what, this is the time that I can probably figure that out. And so I'm in the middle of doing that, and that's a bit of a struggle, but you know, it's fun. I'm learning how to do more stuff with, you know, my hands, not cutting them off, that sort of thing. So it's good. So there's this Neptunia Syria, but they're a mix of VN and JRPGs. So maybe not as dense as DJ Tears. Like, yeah, that's true. I've never been interested in that series besides for the meme stuff, and that, you know, like they made the villain for it R4 because of piracy, like, which is like a DS cartridge reference. But But anyways, I like the memes in that one, but I can't actually even see myself playing that one as just like a JRPG. And I do enjoy JRPGs. Just maybe it's just because it's little girls. That it really doesn't appeal to me. I probably shouldn't have deleted my Anki decks to start over. Now I can't find the N5 and N4 deck I was using. Dude, like that's there are two types of people that delete their Anki decks. The people that regret it and the people that don't and just give up on Anki. I definitely recommend not deleting your decks for Anki because I've just seen this so many times where people are like, oh, I deleted this deck for Anki and now I'm trying to find it again. It's like, stop deleting your decks, people. Like, it's fine to just keep it, like, backed up. Like, you know, locally, it'll get deleted if you don't use Anki for a long time on the cloud. But in general, I would not recommend people delete their Anki. Anyways, some other things that happened this year. New tooling. So I already kind of covered that, you know, the Holy Trinity is this 3 that we're seeing over here. Like, there's a new clipboard inserter that makes it just really easy to use. It's such a small thing, but you don't have to press the on button every time you open the tab. And I love that so much because it's an optimization thing that should have just been there from the beginning. But until this person made a custom extension that's not even on the store, like, you'll probably have to look up this GitHub page that I linked to on Twitter to find this thing. It's kind of hard to find, quite honestly. But it's definitely the way to go if you're going to be doing a lot of text hooking, which if you're learning Japanese, like, just figure out how to do this stuff now. It's going to be useful. Yomitan. So if you don't know, Yomi-chan shutting down. Fusoft, the dude who was doing it forever, was just like, hey, yo, I'm hanging up my coat. I'm done doing this. I got what I wanted out of it. And now the Moe Way has been kind enough to basically pick that up. And DARIUS has actually been the one who's, I feel like, been leading that. And I think that's been really great that that tool's not going to die because it's literally the most useful immersion tool you can get outside of Anki. So I just started trying out Yomitan the other day, and I really do think it's going to be a appropriate and future-safe solution for literally the second most important tool in my toolkit right next to Anki. And then the other one is there's this Texthooker by Junji. Junji has been making some like really good stuff in Japanese as well for Japanese tools. He just improved the Tsu reader thing. The Tsu, like, difficult to say, but TTSU reader. Go ahead and look that up if you're into novels. He just made it a lot easier to sync it between devices. Love that. The Texthooker is without a doubt like the best one. He took a lot of feedback from me. Like, I kept making issues and he was just always on top of it. All my kind of wild desires that I asked for, he incorporated them, he implemented them. And I am super grateful because I'm using it every day and really appreciate it, Junji. Beyond that, so if we look at KanjiEater's GitHub stats, I was also very busy this year doing some coding. Particularly with this new one that I've been playing around with, which was this AudiobookTextSync. Man, I got to come up with a catchier name than that, but that's what it does. It'll sync up your audiobook to a novel's text using Whisper AI, the thing made by the ChatGPT people that basically syncs up language. Their open source tool, Whisper AI, is incredible, and I'm super glad that I could figure out how to use it to basically make it so that you can watch an audiobook with subtitles. It's just a really cool way to read through novels, but get that enhanced experience of having voice acting on it, which is really important to me. Like, if I have any choice ever to like play a worse version of a VN, but it's got voice acting, I'm taking the one with voice acting every day because I just feel like that just enhances the experience so much. It's the same thing for books. So I read through a couple Arslan Senki books this year, as well as this Kagami no Kojo down here at the bottom, that was a popular one that received an anime recently. And those were really fun. Good way to do it. Also, I was able to speed up the playback speed for that last novel that I mentioned reading. Got it up to like, 1.2, 1.3 speed, and then was able to go through it a little bit faster than I would have if I was just like reading it as a natural book. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's kind of setting a pace. I would really recommend, if you're actually using something like this, that you're definitely, it becomes really easy to white noise what's going on and not looking up stuff if you're at a low level, or if the book that you're reading is at a difficulty level beyond what you're used to. So even for me, like reading Arslan Senki, I have to force myself to be really conscious of what I'm reading. Otherwise, it gets really easy to just like let a couple pages go by in the book and you just have no clue what's going on. Even to this day for VNs, I don't do the auto play because I would rather just have a conscious decision of me moving through each piece of text. So eventually that'll probably change as I become more and more confident. Just hit the autoplay like I used to with English JRPGs, and I always enjoyed doing it that way. So watching it more like a movie, but for now, I rarely do the autoplay for these books using this tool. I do. So it is maybe a little bit more complicated than some other tools to get set up because you do have to be able to run Python. There are a bunch of helpful people on the Moe Way Discord that have contributed subtitles that you don't have to run it yourself, and you can just kind of enjoy their hard work. But it's a cool tool. Check it out. All right, so we've been going on a while, almost an hour and a half. So voice is given out here pretty soon, but let's wrap this up. So initial 2024 goals. This is what I'm thinking. So I've kind of touched on it. It should be no surprise that kind of what my experiences were from 2022, the year of the VN, where I did a whole bunch of VN stuff, to 2023, where I started doing more things than just VNs, started getting back into manga a little bit more, started doing other things like trying out TRPGs and that sort of thing. Started doing a little bit more podcasting because listening to podcasts because I had to, because I was doing more stuff like building a deck, which deck party this year, boys, invite your anime girlfriends. We'll be having some parties out there for sure, reading manga, probably by myself or maybe with my wife. But anyways, feel free to stop on by the KanjiEater Haunted Mansion and enjoy my deck with me, and we will read some manga together. Anyways, 2024 though, no surprise. I'm probably not going to have as much free time as I did in 2022. That's just the reality. I don't want to just do one thing, even though I know that I would feel a lot of progress in that one thing. So if I was just like, let's just get through that VN backlog, like I could do that, but I would have to sacrifice everything else. I would love to just suck it up and say, all right, no reading this year. Like, I'm just not going to focus on it. Maybe not no reading, but like, we'll do like 4 hours of like Japanese audio, just watching YouTube or something like that. I'm really not going to do that though either. I'm probably just going to try to balance it out and make TRPGs the focus. If I can get one in, I'm going to get one in one of the sessions. They depend on other people, so it's not really up to me when I can, but when the opportunity is there, I need to be able to pounce on it. And that's just in general what I need to be able to do with Discord, Japanese service in general. Even, I have all of this confidence here in English, but when it comes to like actually just hopping into a Japanese Discord server, I'm still pretty slow to like just jumping into chat, joining in some random people's conversations, trying to join and make some friends. So I would say that's really, I need to get better at that. And I feel like I probably was better at that back when I was in Japan, obviously, when it was a little bit more natural. I was working with the people. But now it's like, I just kind of have to force it. And that's just the reality of not living in Japan. Sure would be convenient if I hadn't bought some house and was actually living in Japan, but that's not the reality, and that's not where I'm at. And I'm happy with where I'm at. So that's okay with me. But anyways, the key is this is going to come down to balance at this point. So got to balance stuff out, but we'll be focusing on a lot of the audio stuff that had been a little bit shorter. And I'll definitely be trying to still balance that out with keeping up with some manga serializations that I enjoy reading and some VNs. I threw down some basic numbers for kind of what I'm thinking. Basically, I can probably get through one VN every 2 months. Like, that's not too crazy. And I'm talking about like big ones like Muramasa or something like that. Like Persona 5 is another one that I think that game's like 100 hours. It's probably going to take me 2 months to get through because I'm going to probably do like 2 hours a day or something like that. So we'll see. 2 hours a day, 100-hour game. That's like 50 sessions basically. And that's probably realistic to what it'll actually be reading. I've really been dropping the ball with reading novels. So my novel backlog went down by 3 this year. And in 2022, when I wasn't reading any novel, well, I read like one novel the entirety of 2022. I've read like 30 Japanese novels, so I used to read novels more, but I just really dropped the ball on that the last couple of years. So I'm gonna force that to be at least 30 minutes a day. I've been doing it recently, like right before I go to bed, and I found that to be the most effective sleeping pill I could take, to a point where it's becoming an issue. Where now, anytime, well, it's not just now, it's anytime I pick up a novel, it feels like that's like instantly knocking me out. At this point, I'll open one up in like the middle of the day with sunlight just to try it. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to take a nap. So I don't know, something's going on with my brain with the novels at this point. No flashy pictures, so it just puts me right to sleep. So then we got games. That's like I mentioned, I've just really like, it was the point of me learning Japanese, and yet here I am, and I've Infinite Backlog is the site that I use to track what games I'm playing. It's a really good backlogging site, so I do highly recommend that one. But I looked at the list, and it's like my backlog is so huge compared to what I actually want to play and get through. I was like, yeah, let's just figure out how to make that a more normal part of what I'm doing. I realized that this year I spent about 60 hours on games. Now, compared to like VNs, which you could consider those games, I don't. Not really. I mean, they're just kind of different. You in the same way that I can consider an RPG a VN. Anyways, I digress. For games, like compared to VNs, I probably have like, I don't know, 1,000 hours of VNs this year, but like 60 of actual games. So like, there's so many good ones. Like there's so many great games to experience, and I'm just completely ignoring that entire medium, I feel like. So gotta get back into that. Anyways, these are some Japanese maples that are in the front of my house. Those are super pretty, right? And the leaves are changing at different colors, so that's kind of weird. Like one's red, and then like one's this yellow orange or yellow green. So anyways, continuing on with goals. So I mentioned before, like kind of having a phobia of English almost at this point for experiencing it. I was like, got to get into that because I have a backlog of like English audiobooks at this point of just stuff that's not getting published to Japan that I think would 1 hour a week ain't gonna kill me, and it'll probably make a reasonable impact on my life. I used to do that before. Like I wouldn't do any passive immersion in like the first like 3 years of me age adding, because I was like, oh no, this is too valuable. Like these like books on how to think, basically. And I still think those are really useful, and I just completely dropped them. And I feel like I really missed that. So I want to get back into that. At this point, though, I can probably do that with some Japanese podcasts as well, because they do exist. The fact is, there's just not as many that have stuck out to me. If you guys know of any good ones, like self-improvement podcasts, or just, things in that vein, educational ones, I'd really be interested in what they are, because I'd love to check them out. But I'll probably start doing at least a little bit in English, because at this point, 5 years basically of age adding, it's like, I've kind of probably earned it. It's fine. And then probably same deal, like probably an English audiobook on parenting, because 2024, it's the year to put a baby in a woman. I gotta figure that out, guys. So it's about that time. That's kind of also what this house is kind of setting us up for, is to start a family. So hopefully we'll have some little kanji munchers running around soon. By soon, I mean hopefully not too soon, please. Because I'm still not ready. I gotta start these audiobooks first. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Also, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I found out that some of y'all are slacking on the sleep and exercise. Throw dieting in there appropriately. Not going on a diet, but watching what you're eating and stuff. Guys, if you want to enjoy the Weeb stuff for as long as possible, please don't skip on that. I want to keep y'all in my podcast and coming back and hanging out as long as possible. And some of you aren't taking your exercise and your sleep very seriously. I always do. I exercise every day, and so should you. That's my plug for that. I won't preach to you anymore on that. So community streams probably need to. That's another goal. It's like, so 2023, I didn't do anything at all, and it kind of contributed to back where I was like, ooh man, this feels kind of bad, right? Ooh, not a great feeling. And so this year, it's like, let's get back into that, guys. Let's. I figure I can probably do some of these a little bit more casual. You know, if I don't have to make these fancy PowerPoint presentations, just do something that's probably like, originally I was thinking, oh, let's just stream like some Metroid Prime or something like that. And I was like, you know, there are useful things that I can probably just show people how to do that'll still be fun for me. and that I don't have to put like a whole bunch of prep work into. And that's kind of like with the podcast, it kind of at some point just feels like a chore, right? Like even as low maintenance as my podcast episodes are, like it still ends up being like more work than I would want to do. So like I probably need to just do some more casual things where it's like, you know, showing people how to patch a VN, which is the thing that I want to kind of get into maybe tonight later on if we have time. It's probably going to be outside of this podcast episode. We'll probably start and restart. Stop and restart. And then other things like, oh, like here's like my Anki setup. Like here are all the extensions. Here's how things are set up. Maybe walk through some of that stuff. The tool videos for like creating Japanese tools in Japanese were really well received, actually. They actually have a decent amount of views. People use them. People still pop in the Discord every now and then to ask, you know, are you still using this thing? Is it still useful? And the answer is, yeah, pretty much. I don't use the Kindle one because I don't really use my Kindle as much as I used to. The dictionary one, Golden Dict, I do use that to look up images really quickly with a single hotkey, and just every once in a while when I'm like actually making an Anki card or enhancing an Anki card with more images, more definitions, like that's still my go-to. So it would probably be good for me to share a couple more of the tools that have got hidden away in my tool belt that I haven't shared out, because I am constantly like tinkering with stuff on my own, writing new scripts and pieces to help out, and I haven't been doing a real great job of sharing that. But then there's stuff like the AudiobookTextSync that I have this year, so I don't want to beat myself up too bad, but that's kind of where that's at. I would like to hopefully do a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more low maintenance. I have some ideas for some club stuff this year for the Deep Weeb Lounge. So I don't want to announce that before it's ready, but it would definitely be here in the next couple of weeks that we'd probably talk about that if that happens, and then I would commit to that for a year. So if we do end up doing that club, whatever it may be, it's going to be for at least a solid year that you guys are going to get to hang out, and hopefully we'll get to do some more stuff. Because what I found, like I said, in 2023, it just didn't feel the same without doing it with like at least some community. And while I would love to do it with some Japanese community, I just don't really see like, for instance, like really solid VN clubs in Japanese. Like it's just not a thing that I've seen. But I think that it's super useful, and that if you're not a part of one, you really should be, just so that you have somebody that you're experiencing this stuff with as you're going through it, and not just taking the neat life to the extreme. Don't go full hikikomori on us. And then otherwise, yep, more house stuff is coming. Like I said, probably can do a full episode on some of the terrors and highlights of working through this house, because, oh, baby, it's been a ride. All right, so let's go ahead and check back through some questions or anything that may have come up on chat. So have you tried exSTATic for VNs? Tried it. I guess I can't say that I fully gave it a full KanjiEater college try. I did look through it. I think it's really cool. I think it's totally worth checking out if you aren't already tracking your stats. I already have a spreadsheet that works really well for me, that makes some of the graphs like I've shown before, some of the graphs that I've shown in the habit building Discord server. I like the exSTATics, everything about it, the mentality behind it, but I'm not using it myself because I already have stuff that basically does all of it, and it's probably at a point where I can tinker with it more as it's my own thing. I can waste more of my time by working on my own tools with it. So I still do prefer just using it. Also, no matter how good a tool like exSTATic gets, like it's going to be limited to stuff like VNs, whereas I feel like stat tracking should really go beyond like just VNs or something like that. But if you wanted to use it for one simple medium, that's probably good too. What other questions do you guys have? Start putting those in chat because we are wrapping this up. Have you read Junji Ito's Mold? No, but it sounds cool. Anything by Junji Ito I'd like to check out. The fact is, the places where I tend to get some manga from, a lot of time doesn't have like the newest Junji Ito stuff. So the translations usually drop online and people see those before the raws get uploaded anywhere. So I either have to be a sucker and go ahead and support the medium that I care for, or wait a really long time to get some of Junji Ito's good stuff. I did start whatever his collection was again. I forgot where I was picking it up. Oh yeah, we're the guy with the like crosses on his head. Whatever that's called in Japanese. That's some fancy cultural thing too. But I started reading that a little bit for the manga probably around October, but then I kind of fell off on that. In general, like I really like Junji Ito. Also, the guy who influenced him, Umezu Kazuo, absolutely love all of his stuff. So like the Drifting Classroom, that one's a classic. Also pretty easy. So if you're looking for an easy manga with furigana, highly recommend the Drifting Classroom. Kid's gonna be getting stabbed in it. It's kind of dark because that's what I'm into. But then also he did Juyonsai, which is it's got Chicken Joji in it. Just look that up. Like 14 years old, the manga. It's by Umezu Kazuo. I've only read like 2 volumes in it, and I think there's over 10 depending on the publication version. But this one's pretty wild. So let's see. Maybe traumatizing to you at the moment though. Yeah. The mold might be a little traumatizing to me given this house. Mold actually in this house was not the worst thing. It was what the squirrels had done to this place that was hidden behind the walls, which we won't talk about it tonight, but yeah. Any plans for more interviews? Great question, Immersion. I'll go ahead and just say it now. I think it's gonna be Darius from the Moe Way. The guy who I just mentioned was doing Yomitan and helping out with that. Dothan Hamslice ages ago had told me, hey, get him on here. He just said he'd be interested. We can figure out what the exact timeline is for it, but I would love to talk to somebody as experienced as him. That last I checked, he was actually in Japan working at a Japanese company, and I think he'll have a lot of useful insights. He has published at least one video to YouTube where he's kind of talking about pitch accent, and I think that's another useful thing that if you cover it appropriately can really be a worthwhile thing to explore in Japanese too. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Have you used the tool Migaku? Is it worth the money? I've directly to Yoga criticized Migaku a little bit, and I try to be really thoughtful because I know he does mean really well with what he's doing, and I know a lot of people like using the Migaku tool set. I have used a lot of the Migaku tools back in the day when it was part of the MIA brand. I was a supporter for that, but that was back when stuff was getting released for free. At some point, it seems like people that make Japanese tool sets try to make these things that they call Anki killers. And as an Anki fanboy, I usually just kind of scoff at that because the problem with Anki typically isn't that it's too complex, which it is complex. It's not that the algorithm needs to be improved on it or something like that. It's that you're not consistent using it. So it's like, you know what? Buying a new tool isn't actually going to fix your problem with like some of these Anki killers that get released. That never work. Nobody's killed Anki. It's been around for 10 years. It's open source. It has a massive community. Like, yeah, there are some really fair criticisms of it, but the fact is it gets better and better every year. It gets more and more stable as far as the software goes every year. And I really actually enjoy using it. So I still see Anki as a normal part of getting better in Japanese as an ongoing thing. As long as I'm intentionally trying to get better at Japanese, I still think Anki is being the go-to thing. Migaku has a lot of different tools though, so it really depends on which specific tool you're talking about. I know they recently combined everything. Recently, I don't know how recent it is at this point. They started combining everything into a browser extension. I don't know. I would have to look into what specifically they're doing at this point. But last time I looked at it, I was like, that's pretty limited. Then there's stuff like the Kanji God add-on or whatever. I just saw somebody today saying they were going to drop it. Good. You don't need something like that. Like, if you're going to learn kanji, you don't need something like that. You don't need RTK. You don't need anything like any of the things that I've done. You really just need to start focusing on vocab and immersing a bunch, and you'll get it. Just give it time. So if you have something specific about Migaku, I could say, again, I'm not a subscriber. I don't use their stuff anymore, basically. But in general, there's always free resources if you know the people to ask. And I could point you to probably the Moe Way because they've got like that's you know, like I don't work for the Moe Way. They don't pay me to shill for them. But in general, like they've got a lot of free resources. There are a lot of smart people there that can pretty much help out and answer any of those sorts of questions. So in general, I would say if you have to ask, is it worth the money? The answer almost for any tool, not just Migaku, is probably no. There are enough free resources. Sometimes you can use money, sure, to like make things go faster. Like if you get an italki tutor, you can just pay someone to sit there for an hour with you and speak to you in Japanese. That's going to be faster than waiting for somebody to jump onto a Discord server. But in general, like there's free alternatives. So in general, that's what I'm going to recommend because it's the most accessible. Are you going to make a guide for newbies to the tool using in learning Japanese? No, I'm not. I don't have any plans to make any guides for learning Japanese because I think the ones that are out there are sufficient. I've read through at least the Moe Way and I was like, dang, that's good. I read through animecards. It at least points you in the right direction for a couple of tool sets. I reference both of those when I need to reset up a tool or something like that. And I think those are good. I think there are a couple other people that have posted like their immersion setups, and I posted them to my Discord server. I think that's completely sufficient if you're a beginner and you want to use those. So, Migaku add-ons are free to use. Are they these days? Because last I checked, there was like some gateways, some payment gateway stuff that I thought was there. Like you had to. Maybe I don't want to spread false news, so if you're saying they're free now, that's great. They used to be free back in the day, but then they completely abandoned the trajectory they were on to go for the extension route. And that was the point where I was like, okay, if you're just going to abandon what you already have that already works, I don't know that I really want to follow you to where you're going because I see it becoming more and more closed off, which is where they're kind of going with that Anki Killer app where it's going to be some paid subscription. So no offense. If you like using that, I'm sure you could potentially get some good benefits out of it. Yeah, I'm starting to talk out of the side of my mouth because it's like I'm not really convinced you're going to get your money's worth out of it, but that's just me being skeptical and having, done other stuff that worked for me. So I missed the beginning, but if you moved to the newest Anki version, I've been putting off in case extension issues. Dude, okay. So this is the issue with Anki right here is every time you update Anki, it does feel like a house of cards because those darn extensions. Luckily, I do have some programming experience. So it's like if something breaks, I might just fix it myself. You know what I mean? And I get that not everybody has that skill. So that's a pretty high barrier to entry. But in general, if you wait long enough and you only update like once a year, there's usually somebody else who has, if you're not doing anything super custom, which I am, so because I'll write my own scripts and stuff. But if you're not doing something super custom, you'll just be able to do it, update it appropriately yourself. So I think probably as long as you're using mainstream add-ons, you probably won't have a bunch of issues when you do finally decide to take the plunge. It does take time. It can break your workflow, but don't try to update a whole bunch is what I would say. It's going to waste your time if you're always trying to be on the latest version of Anki. If there's not something specific you're looking for, just don't update. It works until like things do break for you. Like I had the Anki web wouldn't sync because I wasn't using the V3 scheduler, and I was like, all right, time to update. So it's been one weekend day spending probably a couple hours making sure everything worked. And it went relatively smoothly this time, when in the past I've had it where it's like, nope, got to stay on the old version longer. So that's the reality of Anki, and that is, I would say, the one of the sticking points. But that's the reality. Okay, we did have some questions over in the Discord. So there's one new one that was posted as well as a couple old ones. Opinions. Okay, so somebody did just post this in chat. FSRS for Anki, or the classic one that it's had, SM2. I have not tried the new algorithm. I watched the guy's college thesis video or whatever. I think it sounds really cool. I didn't particularly feel motivated to have my massive Anki collection go into testing out whether his stuff works, because we didn't talk about Anki as much as my Anki loving self probably would have liked tonight. Like we got to save that for another night. But the basics of where I was at with it is I'm at a really good place with Anki right now. I don't want to mess it up. You know what I mean? It's like I got an appropriate amount of reviews at this point. I got enough time that I can learn some new words in it, but I don't really want to mess it up. And I think the FSRS is probably moving people in the right direction. And because the algorithm that's been in there is old, but it works. It does work. So it works for me. It's maybe not the most efficient, but I would love to see more algorithms be introduced over time. But what I don't want is for it to not have the math and science to back it up. And I feel like that's one of those things that I haven't seen any of them do that I think this one might be able to do. I think it's getting enough wide stream adoption that we might see definitively what the difference is from unbiased sources. So that's kind of my thought on that right now. So Cool asked, where is the Doth now? I didn't want to have to get into drama too much, but I don't know if you guys noticed, but Doth isn't here. Also, Doth isn't in the Discord. Doth got fired. Like that's the only nice way to put it. And if he wants to come back, he can, but he's gonna have to do a written apology because he left the Discord. We had a falling out because I told him to stop recommending sus recommendations like mommy light novel and that sort of stuff. But he's addicted to the rom-com stuff, and I'm like, dude, that stuff is not otaku. You can't be having that. So he was like, you know what? Either I got to keep pushing my rom-com agenda, or I got to go. And I was like, all right, Kubi, like that's your neck. Get out of here. And so Doth is gone. None of that's true. Well, only part of that's true. He left the Discord, and I don't know why. So he should really come back and then apologize for leaving, because that's such a rude thing to do to all of us. I'm sure he just was taking a break from some of the quieter Discords, which mine definitely falls into. But Doth, we miss you. Please come back, please. So then Seven Stop asks, whose cock do I need to suck to get on the podcast? That would be mine. But as a married heterosexual male, you know what, to get on any podcast, you really shouldn't have to do that, Seven Stop. I will say, like, you've got your own YouTube channel, dude. Like, whose dick I gotta suck to get on the Seven Stop YouTube channel? You know what I mean? So, in general, let me answer this question seriously once and for all, because I get asked this a lot. You know, like, KanjiEater, when am I getting on the podcast? All right, so first off, there's like 16 episodes of the podcast, and as you could see from this year, it's a limited quantity. We aren't cranking out a whole bunch of episodes. So the chances of anybody getting on there are reasonably slim. At this point, I'm wondering when I'm going to get on the podcast. You know what I mean? Which I guess right now, but it's like there's not a whole bunch of people. So don't be offended if you don't get on the podcast. But you know what? If you're dropping into my DMs on Discord and being like, hey, like, bring me on the podcast, and you've never talked to me, we don't have any relationship, I don't know you, I don't even know if I like you, and you've never done anything meaningful with Japanese besides maybe pass the JLPT N1, it's like, at this point, the bar's got to raise, right? We can't just do like JLPT N1 speedrunning anymore, guys. We got to step it up. And from now on, I think it's going to have to be, what are you using Japanese from? The most important way. So here's what you got to hear. You want to do the podcast. What it really comes down to is, are other people wanting to hear what you have to say? Because that's like the way that's the way I met Doth, right? That's the way Jazzy got on. That's the way Aussie Man got on. It's like people say, KanjiEater, go check these people out, and I go check them out, and I'm like, hey, these people are cool. I would love to learn more from them. So that's the simple way. Get other people to tell me how great you are, and then you'll have no problem getting on the podcast. Okay. So somebody else switched to FSRS. Been a bit of a double-edged sword. They said, I lowered my cards in general, but it dumps 5 days worth or so every time I pre-optimize. Ooh, yeah. So that's one of those things that with Anki, I'm definitely trying to wait until things kind of get ironed out. I don't really have any desire to be the guinea pig for that one. Just because Anki is a daily part of the life, and I don't want to ruin it. All right, so not sure if it's better to put the question in here or in the YouTube chat, but would love to hear what you've learned about the most efficient way to improve chokairoku. So yeah, listening comprehension. How do you improve it? I think we kind of already covered that, so I'll keep it brief. But how do you improve listening comprehension? You do more stuff with listening comprehension. It's not sexy. It's not fun necessarily for me. If you got the Aussie man gene, maybe you can just watch 8 hours of YouTube. That's how you get better at listening. Just spend a bunch of time listening. All right. I think that's probably all the questions. I think this was probably enough content for you all. We are now at exactly 2 hours. So I will remind you all, please do subscribe. Nice big subscribe button. I appreciate all of you hanging out. We'll definitely have to do this again because I enjoy just kind of like dumping all this stuff out here. This was a little bit more low maintenance than a normal podcast episode. So I appreciate, one, you guys bearing with me. Two, just please do give me feedback if there was anything technical or weird. This was the first time that we've streamed to YouTube. So yeah, definitely let me know if you have any feedback on that. Please do keep your wrist strong for wrist out for Michael and carpal tunnel.